Your boots will betray you. In sub-zero cold, the wrong move doesn't just hurt, it kills. During WWII, more soldiers lost limbs to frostbite than to bullets. In the Battle of the Bulge alone, over 90,000 American troops froze in place, many before they ever saw the enemy. Their secret weapon? Boot hacks. Improvised, brutal, and effective. These aren't myths. These are field-tested tricks that saved lives when the cold became the real killer. And if you think it can't happen today, ask the 23 hikers who lost toes in Montana's last winter storm. You need to learn these hacks before your boots turn into coffins. Let's break down the forgotten survival tactics that even modern gear still copies today. 5. The bacon grease barrier. WWII's forgotten fat hack that shielded toes from death. Most people today wouldn't dare smear bacon grease inside their boots, but in 1943 on the frozen ridges of Monte Cassino or deep in the forests of Karelia, it was one of the most effective survival tools a soldier could get his hands on. Yes, bacon grease, or more broadly, animal fat, wasn't just food. It was armor. You see, when temperatures dropped below 20 degrees and stayed there for weeks, soldiers needed a barrier that was waterproof, insulating, and something they could scavenge or barter for when supplies ran dry. Enter lard, tallow, and bacon drippings, the unholy trinity of foot protection on the battlefield. Soldiers discovered that by coating their socks or bare feet with a layer of rendered fat, they could create a semi-sealed environment that prevented moisture from escaping, while also trapping body heat like a biological thermal blanket. Here's why it worked. Fat molecules are hydrophobic, meaning they repel water. By soaking the inside of their socks or the inner surface of leather boots with a thin layer of grease, soldiers essentially blocked sweat from escaping into the outer wool, keeping their insulation dry. It also formed a wind-resistant seal, slowing down convective heat loss, and in some cases, grease even helped prevent boot leather from cracking in sub-zero temperatures, which was common when boots froze and thawed repeatedly. It wasn't perfect, of course. Boots could get slippery inside, and the smell, let's just say it cleared out tents. But when your toes were on the line, nobody cared about fashion. British SAS units fighting behind German lines in Norway were known to stock small tins of beef tallow for this exact reason, often smuggled in with rations or made from local animal fat. Even Soviet partisans relied on pig grease, often stolen or traded from rural farms, to survive winter ambushes. Now you can adapt this method today. Just substitute the fat for modern petroleum jelly or lanolin-based products like Vaseline or bag balm. Rub a thin layer on your feet, then put on a synthetic liner sock to keep it in place, followed by your insulation layer and boot. This WWII trick remains surprisingly effective in extreme cold because it's not about technology, it's about creating a microclimate around your skin. Soldiers didn't do this for comfort. They did it because frostbite meant amputation, infection, or death. That's not paranoia, that's wartime science. 4. The boot-over-boot tactic, how layering footwear saved thousands on the ice front. Let's talk about a trick that looks ridiculous but saved thousands of lives. Wearing a boot over another boot. Yes, that's right. During the deadliest winters of WWII, particularly in the Soviet and Finnish theaters, soldiers created what we now call a double boot system, a crude ancestor of today's modular footwear. This wasn't a fashion statement. It was field-engineered insulation against the kind of cold that shattered steel and silenced entire units. Soviet snipers and Finnish ski troops were masters of this. They would wear their standard-issue felt boots, Valenki, inside an oversized outer boot made from leather, canvas, or even repurposed tank tarp. This double-layered system worked on the same principle as double-pane windows, air insulation. The gap between the inner and outer boot trapped warm air, which is the best insulator known to man. And when temperatures hit 40 degrees, that air gap could mean the difference between returning with 10 toes or just 9. But it went beyond just warmth. The outer boot also served as a weather shield, blocking snow, ice, and slush from soaking into the inner boot. In battles like the Siege of Leningrad or the Arctic convoys in Murmansk, where wet snow turned to ice on contact, this was critical. Allied engineers noted that soldiers using the boot-over-boot method reported 70% fewer frostbite cases than those using single-layer footwear, especially during prolonged exposure. In field hospitals, it became so obvious that frostbite cases were nearly always traced back to inadequate boot insulation or wet socks, never from the soldiers using the bulky double boot system. Modern military and survival gear took this lesson to heart. Look at today's bunny boots issued by the U.S. Army for Arctic missions. They're designed with an inner and outer boot, and even include an air valve to equalize pressure. If you're out in deep winter terrain today, you can replicate this by pairing a high-insulation boot like the Baffin Impact or Sorel Glacier XT with a waterproof overshoe. Think Neos Adventurer or even an old-fashioned rubber galosh 2 sizes up. It looks clumsy, it's not sexy, but neither is Frostbite. The genius of this WWII hack lies in the simplicity of physics. Trap warm air, block cold ingress, manage moisture escape. Soldiers didn't need Gore-Tex to survive sub-zero patrols. They needed air, space, and a second boot, and that's a lesson modern survivalists would be foolish to forget. 3. The charcoal sole insert. Hack. WWII's hidden heat source that turned boots into furnaces. You ever hear of a soldier walking through the snow with fire in his boots? Sounds like a fairy tale, but in the frozen hellscapes of the Ardennes, the Carpathians, and the steppes outside Stalingrad, troops on both sides discovered a wild, almost alchemical trick that actually worked. Charcoal sole inserts. Not glowing coals, of course. Nobody was lighting fires in their boots, but activated charcoal mixed with cloth, dried moss, or even canvas strips, fashioned into crude insoles. This isn't some survival myth. It's documented in field logs, soldier memoirs, and after-action medical reports. Why? Because activated charcoal is highly porous, which means it doesn't just trap moisture, which we've already covered as frostbite's best friend. It also retains heat like a miniature thermal battery. The concept: trap warmth, block dampness, and create a soft, radiant heat barrier under the foot. Here's how it was done. Soldiers would crush spent charcoal from fires, usually wood charcoal, never coal, into a fine grain. Then wrap it tightly in multiple layers of cloth or cheesecloth, stitched or folded flat to fit inside the boot sole. Some troops even layered it between 2 pieces of felt or scavenged leather. Once inside the boot, the foot's pressure and friction would slightly warm the insert, and because charcoal holds onto heat energy and repels moisture, it provided a dry, warm platform that insulated better than anything standard issue. And here's the kicker: it also eliminated odor and prevented fungal infections that ran rampant in trench conditions. Modern science backs this up. Activated charcoal can hold up to 25% of its own weight in moisture, and can insulate better than many commercial foams when dry-packed. In post-war analyses, medical researchers found that soldiers who used charcoal soles experienced fewer cases of trench foot and minor frostbite by nearly 50% compared to standard boot users. This isn't a hack that stayed in the past either. Some modern cold-weather insoles, especially those made for ice fishing or Arctic trekking, are lined with carbon fiber or charcoal-based foam for precisely this reason. And if you're heading into extreme cold today, try this field-tested setup. Take a layer of felt or thick cloth. Add a packet of activated charcoal like the kind sold for pet filters or detox kits. Spread it evenly, stitch it shut, and slide it under your sock. You'll notice the difference within hours. Dry feet, warmer arches, and far less cold seepage from snowpack or icy ground. Just like the toughest soldiers of WWII, you'll be walking on heat. 2. Wool-on-wool friction layer, the silent heat amplifier. No one talks about. Most people think more insulation means thicker layers, but here's the WWII secret they didn't teach in cold weather school. Friction equals fire, at least when it comes to surviving inside a frozen boot. While most troops were stuffing boots with newspaper or lining them with fat-soaked socks, elite Arctic divisions, especially Norwegian resistance fighters and Finnish ski troops, were doing something brilliant and almost invisible, layering 2 thin wool socks over each other to generate micro-friction. Not cotton, not silk, just 100% wool on wool. Why? Because wool on wool layers generate and retain more warmth than a single thick sock, not by bulk, but by motion. Every time you walk, shift, crouch, or pivot, the inner sock rubs gently against the outer, creating micro heat pulses that accumulate and circulate within the boot cavity. Think of it like a heat engine for your feet. When you move, you're not just pushing blood through the extremities, which already helps fight frostbite. You're also activating a friction layer that amplifies warmth by harnessing your own movement. Soldiers reported this method made a 15 to 20 degrees internal difference during long marches. That's not a theory. It was field-tested. Post-war data from Canadian mountain divisions found soldiers using dual wool sock layering in sub-zero conditions had 80% fewer cold-related foot injuries, including chilblains and early frostbite, compared to those wearing one thick sock. And it wasn't just about heat. This method also wickered sweat between the sock layers, trapping it away from the skin without saturating the boot. Essentially, it created a passive moisture filter and radiant heat loop, all inside a combat boot. Modern cold-weather athletes unknowingly mimic this with double sock systems in ski boots or mountaineering gear, but it all traces back to WWII's cold-footed foot soldiers. If you're serious about winter prep, replicate it. Use a thin merino wool sock as a base layer, then a slightly thicker full-cushion wool sock on top. No synthetics, no compression. Leave just enough room to allow independent movement between layers. Your foot becomes a self-warming system. Cold weather isn't just about blocking the environment. It's about using your own biology to fight back. The wool-on-wool friction trick wasn't just a hack. It was a cold weather weapon. 1. The nighttime reverse drying method. The psychological trick that saved toes before dawn. Let's finish with the most counterintuitive genius and gut-wrenching frostbite hack from World War II. The nighttime reverse drying method. You've probably never heard of it because it sounds miserable, but it worked. Here's the deal. Soldiers, especially on the Eastern Front and in the Battle of the Bulge, would remove their damp boot liners or socks each night, and instead of drying them by the fire, which was loud, dangerous, or simply impossible in the field, they wore them to bed, tucked inside their shirts or under their armpits. That's right. They used body heat to dry socks overnight, keeping them warm and preventing them from freezing into stiff, foot-killing slabs by morning. It wasn't comfortable. It was damp, cold, and gross. But it was psychologically critical, because nothing breaks a man faster than waking up shivering in a foxhole and trying to cram frozen socks into frozen boots. That pain, indescribable. This method prevented that. You woke up with warmish socks, dry enough to slip on, and boots that hadn't flash frozen from inner moisture. German Gebirgsjäger, mountain troops, and Finnish Jaeger units documented this ritual in diaries, noting how it reduced morning frostbite cases dramatically and helped them stay mentally focused during brutal cold assaults. Modern survival research supports this. The skin's heat is more effective at slow-drying textiles without hardening fibers than any external source in extreme cold, especially when humidity is high. This technique also offered an added bonus, preventing fungal growth and keeping socks flexible. Cold, stiff fibers reduce circulation just by constriction. Warm socks stretch with your foot, not against it. That flexibility? It's crucial to keep blood moving, which is your #1 defense against frostbite. Soldiers called it sweating the socks clean, but it wasn't really about cleanliness. It was pure survival discipline. And here's the kicker. This method is still used today by special ops in Arctic climates who can't risk a fire or a drying line. Here's how to apply it. After a day in snow boots, wring out your socks. Roll them in a dry cloth, then tuck them under your thermal base layer overnight. It sucks, but come morning, you'll be the only one not crying from cold feet. And in survival, small comforts win wars. If you've made it this far, then you understand something most people never will. Frostbite isn't just about pain. It's about permanent loss. We soldiers didn't survive because they were tougher. They survived because they adapted faster than the cold could kill them. And if you're still relying on store-bought boots alone, you're already at risk. These aren't just tricks. They're war-born tactics that turn socks, straw, and grease into survival gear. If you want more forgotten hacks like this, the kind that don't make it into REI catalogs, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment with the coldest experience you've survived. Or better yet, send this video to someone who thinks their $300 boots make them invincible. Because when the temperature drops, nature doesn't care what you paid. It only rewards those who are prepared.